Warm welcome and thanks so much for joining us this afternoon, and to our friends joining us virtually. It's great to have you. My name's Diz Glithero and I'm the national lead of the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition. We have the pleasure of serving as the host of the third edition of the Ocean Literacy Dialogue series. And for those of you who haven't been a part of one of the sessions this week, this is the 6th session of 7. So we're coming into the home stretch. And the Ocean Literacy Dialogues is an initiative of the Ocean Literacy with All program, which is a UN decade endorsed program. It's coordinated by IOC UNESCO together with a team of partners, many of whom are here with us today. The first edition took place in Lisbon, Portugal at the UN Ocean Conference, and the second edition took place in Santos, Brazil in October. And Canada is lucky to host the third edition. So a warm welcome, and I have a pleasure of introducing Emma McKinley, who is going to serve as the moderator for this exciting session. Thank you.
Thank you, Diz. Hi, everybody. Lovely to see you all at our penultimate Ocean Literacy Dialogue session. We're all very pleased to see so many faces still here. It's brilliant. It's been a really fantastic series of sessions from some fantastic speakers and panelists. So it's really great to have you all with us for this session on sustainable blue economy and ocean literacy. So we've all seen over recent years the growth of conversation around the sustainable blue economy agenda. And alongside that, we've seen that growing emphasis on ocean literacy research. And through this series of events that we've been that Diz was talking about over the last couple of years, sustainable blue economy was identified by our group as one of the key research priorities that we wanted to think about when we were talking about ocean literacy research. And that's what brought us here to today. So we've got a fantastic panel of speakers. Thank you to those that are joining us online as well, if we have somebody joining virtually. I'm not going to do formal introductions. I'm going to ask our speakers to introduce themselves. So first up, I'm going to invite Nathan Bennett to start us off. Yeah.
Just to introduce myself, or to talk as well?
Oh, good. They're there.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Nathan Bennett, and I am actually not an independent consultant any longer as of a few days ago. Well, being an independent consultant is actually a fantastic career. I am the Global Oceans lead scientist for WWF International, and I'm also the chair of the People in the Ocean Specialist Group for the IUCN. And as you'll no doubt guess when I start to speak, my expertise is in the human dimensions of all things oceans. And so I think about the human dimensions of marine conservation, the human dimensions of fisheries, the human dimensions of climate change, and the blue economy in particular. Yeah, I did let you know that. Look, it's on that slide right there.
Oh,
yeah. Can I have the next slide, please? So the oceans are, increasingly viewed as this lucrative space for economic development, and as a result, there's this exponential growth of blue economy activities around the world's oceans. And this includes all manner of economic development activities, aquaculture, wind farm development, blue carbon initiatives. And, though some people may not call it the blue economy, some people do call it the blue economy, oil development and gas development. There's just this huge exponential growth, and it's happening everywhere on the planet. And many governments as well as corporate actors are pushing not only this narrative, but also the reality of blue growth in the blue economy. But while blue economy for some is just a shorthand for all forms of economic development in the ocean, for the small island developing states that really coined and pushed this term of the blue economy, what was at the forefront of their mind was a form of economic development in the oceans that is both sustainable as well as equitable. And so that's kind of imagined in this figure here, if you will, that while there's all different forms of economic development in the ocean, that the blue economy is only that aspect of the ocean economy which aligns with both social sustainability and equity. And I really do think that we should keep this this aspirational vision of the blue economy within our sights. And so if we think in that way, what knowledge then is needed to guide us towards this sustainable and equitable blue economy, and what are the implications for ocean literacy in particular? Next slide. Oh, it's over there. I didn't know where it was coming from or who was doing it actually. Now, if you would just consider for a moment this image from a paper by Phil Levin and co-authors from a couple of years ago, and this shows the Pacific herring fishery. On the left side, you have the ecological and biophysical components of that system. And on the right side, you have the human dimensions, a term that loosely refers to a set of social, economic, cultural, political, and institutional considerations related to a problem. Yet even though fisheries systems are clearly part of a complex social ecological system, fisheries management decisions have often been made without adequate attention to both the social and ecological components of the system. This lack of complete information when making decisions related to fisheries can lead to problematic decisions that don't support either sustainability or equity in the long run. And I would argue here that because oceans are social ecological system, ocean literacy itself must be holistic. Ocean literacy needs to include knowledge of species, habitats, and ecosystem interactions, just as it includes knowledge of people, communities, governance systems, and societal relationships with the oceans. Anything less, in my mind, is an incomplete form of ocean literacy, and is going to lead to a perpetuation of the narrative of humans and oceans as separate and not interconnected. Next slide. And this holistic framing of ocean literacy is important to the blue economy more broadly. One reason is that the development of the blue economy can have both environmental as well as human impacts. As this image here shows, various environmental impacts on the oceans via marine pollution, plastics, climate change, environmental degradation, fisheries declines. These can all impact human well-being in a myriad of different ways. It can impact health, livelihoods, food security, infrastructure, and economics. And furthermore, these impacts can be multiple. They can converge and accumulate, and they're socially differentiated across different axes of identity and are inequitably distributed geographically, both within regions and around the globe. And yet our impact assessments are often limited to environmental metrics. A more holistic understanding of these impacts is needed to guide decisions within the blue economy. Next slide, please. Indeed, because humans are intimately interconnected with the ocean, growth of the blue economy can have wide-ranging impacts on humans and coastal populations. A few years ago, a few co-authors and I published a paper that explored past injustices produced by ocean-based economic development through a qualitative review of the literature. In brief, our review highlighted 10 risks or social injustices. These were related to dispossession, displacement, and ocean grabbing, environmental justice concerns from pollution and waste, environmental degradation and reduction of availability of ecosystem services, livelihood impacts for small-scale fishers, lost access to marine resources needed for food security and well-being, inequitable distribution of economic benefits, social and cultural impacts from ocean development, the marginalization of women, human and indigenous rights abuses, and exclusion from decision-making and governance. Now, this review was purposefully intended to show the worst case consequence if we don't manage the blue economy properly. So these impacts are not inevitable. And if we flip this critical analysis around, we find that each of these risks points to a key consideration or a solution related to the human dimensions that we need to understand better in order to advance a more equitable and sustainable blue economy. So this includes tenure and access, environmental justice, ecosystem services, small-scale fisheries, food security, economic benefits, social-cultural impacts, gender equity, human rights, and inclusive governance. And in fact, the need to address these issues in development is already highlighted in existing international declarations and voluntary agreements, such as the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous Rights, voluntary guidelines on small-scale fisheries, etc. And it's also codified in corporate social responsibility documents. And so these considerations are also often integral parts of national governance frameworks and development aspirations within individual nations. And this is probably most clear back if you look at small island developing states and their national development aspirations for the ocean or blue economy. Last slide. So to close, I would argue that those making decisions related to the blue economy need to be ocean literate, but not just in natural science, but also in social science knowledge and thinking. They need to have a clear understanding of and ability to think about both ecosystems and social systems in order to be able to advance a sustainable and equitable blue economy. But I see a major gap here, both within governments and the private sector in terms of social science knowledge and capacity. So first, it's important that the knowledge base within these organizations includes an understanding of human dimensions of the oceans, things like the different ways that local communities relate to and depend on the oceans, what tenure rights exist in an area, or the potential impacts of new development initiatives on human rights. This means that any efforts to increase ocean literacy within blue economy organizations must include the social sciences. And finally, I believe quite strongly that government agencies with an ocean mandate and the private sector must hire more social scientists. Many fisheries agencies, for example, have few, if any, social scientists within their ranks. Without this, I often wonder how they can expect to understand the social context and the implications of their policy and programmatic decisions. Under international human rights law, the private sector has a responsibility to clearly document and communicate the environmental and social impacts of ocean development decisions. This is the purview of marine social scientists, and they are often missing in teams doing impact analysis. So this is where I will end with the argument that the marine social sciences are a necessary complement to ocean literacy and to making good decisions within the blue economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nathan. So some really important points that have come up there around the ocean literacy of our institutions as well, and how we think about that and how we frame that. I know that's going to be talked about by some of our speakers later. And also in our final session, we'll be talking about how ocean literacy and policy align. So please do stick around if you'd like to for that session as well. We're not going to take questions at this point. So please, if you've got any questions for Nathan, keep them, hold on to them, write them down. We'll have hopefully half an hour for a conversation and discussion at the end. So I'll hand over next to our second speaker, Ronnie.
All good. Hi, everybody. My name is Ronnie Noonan-Birch. I am a master's student at Dalhousie University. It is very exciting for me to be on this panel with a bunch of experts, and particularly it's very exciting for me to be sitting next to Nathan because I cite a lot of his stuff in my thesis. And like Nathan, And like Nathan, I am very passionate and interested in the study and research of human ocean systems. So for the next few minutes, and I'm going to be keeping it pretty brief because I'm certainly looking forward to that panel discussion part of today. I'll be talking about why I believe the blue economy needs a unifying framework to answer this question behind me: who is blue enough, and the role ocean literacy plays. I hope to illustrate this through two examples. So there are so many different audiences of the blue economy, and what success looks like to each of these audiences is a slightly different interpretation for everyone. What does the blue economy look like for early career ocean professionals, for governments, for industry? There's even a debate on how to define the blue economy within audiences. Should the word sustainable be in front of the words blue economy, or is that redundant? That's an argument currently in literature. We do know, however, that the blue economy needs to be distinctly different than the regular ocean economy, and hopefully that will be by putting ocean health first. So on my time talking with you, And in my research, the audience I'm focusing on is industry, specifically industry in Canada. And I want to reiterate what Nathan said, that for the blue economy to be successful, there needs to be a connection to all of those audiences to ocean health. How does ocean health impact them? How does ocean health impact you? And like he said, this is what I think is probably the core goal of ocean literacy. And smarter people than I have said this before, but to create that connection, it is first necessary to start where your audience is at and then bring them to where they need to be. So for industry, the first obvious connection to make is between ocean health and ocean wealth. If, as an ocean company, your asset is a healthy ocean, then you should be making an investment into ocean health. This act of reciprocity isn't only necessary, it actually just makes good business sense. And this is one of the two criteria that I will mention today that I believe should be in a framework to assess a company's blueness, if you will. To be included in the blue economy, companies need to be making an investment into ocean health. And when they do make that investment into ocean health, you can almost see how ocean literacy works both internally and externally. So ocean literacy can be a tool that helps make this connection between ocean health and ocean wealth for industry. And then as an ocean literate company, there should be an obligation to then engage with communities that are impacted by their operations. This leads into what I think another criterion for the blue economy companies should be, and that is stakeholder engagement. And proper stakeholder engagement helps blue economies achieve what many people are probably familiar with as social license to operate. And social license to operate is generally defined as the ongoing acceptance and approval of an operation by those Indigenous and local communities affected by it, and those stakeholders who can affect its profitability. So to obtain and maintain a social license to operate, blue economy companies must be ocean literate enough to engage with these communities, to understand marine and coastal access issues, environmental sustainability concerns, and being able to address ongoing challenges and potential solutions. So to conclude, I think it is necessary to have a framework that can assess how ocean literate a company is, and that ocean literacy should be a necessary component to be included in the blue economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. Some really fantastic points on who gets to be part of that conversation. And also, I think something for us as an ocean literacy research community to reflect on when we think about the fact that a lot of assessment, a lot of measurement of ocean literacy has often focused on members of communities, not institutions, not industries, not businesses. And maybe that's a gap. Maybe that's something we need to think about and think about how we can assess that. We're doing some work on that in a project in the UK where we're trying to look at how ocean literate our policy-making institutions are, but not our businesses. And so maybe that's something we can be looking at. And I know that's something that ISU UNESCO have worked on as well, but it's something perhaps we can think about and talk about in the discussion session. Thank you very much, Ronnie. I'd like to invite our third speaker, who's Sola, who is joining us from Lagos, Nigeria. It is 1 a.m. So we are 2 a.m. So big, yeah. So Sola, over to you.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm clear enough. Am I clear enough? Okay, thank you. Yes, the name is Shola Adeoye, but it can be easily pronounced as Shola. I'm based here in the city of Lagos, that is in Southeast Atlantic. I work with Nature Cares Resource Center. It's a grassroots environmental NGO. I focus my own work with on ocean and the coastal development. And at these days, we're taking steps to look at how we can bring the deep sea to the coast, because we know what happened in the deep sea, what happened in the coast affect the deep sea, what happened in the deep sea affect access to fishery in the coastal region of this part of Africa. And I just want to, go straight to my discussion. I like to call it a discussion because I just want to report to you and the outcome of a pilot project that we just finished on what could be the role of young people, in advancing sustainable blue economy. And then the only way to accomplish that is to go through, sustainable, to go through ocean literacy. Last year, that's 2022, was FAO, United Nations declarations of the years of artisanal fishery. What was important for us about that was to see how many countries around the world, particularly in developing countries, that have, domesticated the FAO voluntary guideline on small-scale fishery. So what we noticed was that quite a number of countries in our part of the world, have not domesticated this document. Of course, it is voluntary, but it doesn't mean that we cannot apply the information within these guidelines to guide our, our fishery, because majorities of fishers in this part of the world, get involved in small-scale fishery. So what our organization did with Coast to Coast movement was to, convert this document into, learning session, curriculum, and then we took it to fishing community to actually engage young people between the age of 13 to 16 to basically find out from them how much do they know about their coast, about fishing generally, and what impact, fishing in their community. And the outcome was very interesting because it was tested in Nigeria, in Peru, in Madagascar, and India. So we actually, came up with a number of varieties of response. We have young people who are well knowledgeable about fishery, about blue economy in their region. Then we have a number of other people, although they live within the coast, they're actually not familiar with how their parents are conducting fishing. They are not familiar about other external users' impact on, on fishing in their communities. And that really was an eye-opener for us that, look, if we actually need to, get into this wider discussion on blue economy, in our context, we use the word sustainable blue economy. The most important thing that we need to consider is that we need to consider every single actor, because the populations of young people in this part of the world is very high, and they also play a strategic role because as ambassador, they can influence discussion around ocean management, ocean health within their schools. At the same time, they can equally work towards changing the curriculum at the school level to include discussions on things that affect the livelihood of their, of their parents. So what we actually got to find out is that if we really want to get involved in discussion around blue economy, this kind of stakeholder, the young people, of course, they don't bring money onto the discussion, but they bring quite a lot of influence. In this case, the population is large. At the same time, they have wider audience in the school. And in some part of this, in some part of the world, particularly here in Africa, the government is just waking up to listen to young people to see how they can contribute to, to global discussion on so many discussions. So as we focus on, on the industries, focus on the role of government, it's also essential to look at what young people can, can do in terms of changing the narrative or redirecting the narrative on blue economy. So one important thing I really want to point out to before I, end up is that in most of the communities where majorities of this project, was carried out, we have competing users of the ocean space. We have dredgers who are, getting sand from the ocean. We have those who harvest mangrove for biomass. Majority of these people are licensed by government, and then without considering what is the impact of their activities on the other users. Young people from this community, from dredgers group, from small-scale fishers, they came together to actually look at what the impact of their parents, with regards to the way the ocean is used, is having on the other users of the ocean. So we begin to open up the discussion to say, look, you can be a change maker. You can actually help to change the narrative with your parents, that there are places where fishers actually do fishing, and this is not going to be the right place for for dredgers to do dredging. Majorly, we have a number of dredgers that do the activities in the night, and from a basic understanding that fish do not actually like noise, and a little bit of disturbance can actually affect fishing. And so with as time goes on, we feel that young people should be part of the discussion around blue economy, and the best way to go about that is to tailor ocean literacy that can actually accommodate their level of knowledge, that can actually encourage them to be a change maker in their community. So this year, hopefully, we plan to scale up this project, because the outcome we actually got was really encouraging. Now we want to go beyond one community, one country, 4 countries rather, to go deep into several other countries, hopefully within West Africa also, to see how we can change the narrative. Here, the discussion around blue economy is at the early stage. So before the oil industry and big trawling fishing industry get into this discussion, we can build generation of young people who will actually change the narrative from home, from school, and at the same time who can equally speak with governments in their town hall meetings to ensure that blue economy is sustainable. At the same time, it brings on board all the actors that are involved, not necessarily the big players like oil industries and other players that whose voices are so loud when you come to discussion that involve money on ground. So thank you very much. This is what I brought to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Sola, and thank you so much for staying up so late to talk to us this evening, afternoon, whatever time it is. Some really important points there, and I think another thing for us to think about when we're thinking about the alignment of those dual agendas of ocean literacy and blue economy is who gets to be part of that conversation, and the role of youth voices, and also perhaps challenging the assumptions that I think we sometimes make, that proximity equals connection equals understanding equals knowledge, and knowing that actually in some coastal communities there may not be the awareness of what the fishing industry is like, what the dredging industry is like, what it might mean to support a sustainable blue economy in certain areas. So some really interesting points being raised. Thank you so much, Sola. And to our final speaker of this afternoon, and hand you over to Patricia.
Thank you, Emma. So I don't have a PowerPoint, but I want to read you something that I prepared. I wanted to stand up, but I don't know if I'll be able to change here the pages. I'll try. Especially because English is not my native language, so I think that in this way I can communicate a bit better. According to the World Wildlife Fund, WWF, if it were a country, the ocean could be considered the 7th economy of the world. According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, SDG 14 is the least funded, receiving only 0.01% of all SDG funding from development finance up to 2019. According to the UN Conference on Trade and Development, ocean economies are worth $3 to $6 trillion per year and support 350 million jobs worldwide. I think it's impossible to calculate the economic value of all marine ecosystem services we are offered by the ocean. That is more than an immense supermarket that delivers its products, asking no money back. The ocean is our common ancestor, our life support system. It's from where all life in our planet comes from. Yes, I can talk about marine resources, but we need to remember at least that it is also sea life. We are ocean lovers, so we must do everything to protect it, since who loves cares, as Jacques Cousteau used to say. But it's time to give back. We need to learn different mindset languages in order to communicate with those who don't have our same cultural or professional background, or even the same love we have. Ocean literacy offers powerful tools that help us in this challenge. When its definition came out in the educational context in the beginning of the year 2000, it was defined as the understanding of our influence in the ocean and of the ocean on us. But life is a continuous adaptation, and even some definitions might change to adapt to the spirit of time. Now, especially under the Ocean Literacy Program led by IOC UNESCO, we have been adapting this original definition. We have been reflecting upon our personal relationship with the ocean, and also translating its 7 principles according to the context where they need to be applied. Ocean literacy must be a vehicle for behavior change. It's not a point of arrival, but a point of departure. We have a huge opportunity to scale ocean literacy worldwide, partnering with the private sector, engaging all their employees in our projects. On one side, fostering ocean conservation, regeneration, and sustainability, while placing the ocean at the center of the 2030 agenda to accelerate all the SDGs in dialogue with different indicators of ESG reports. On the other side, encouraging investments in blue bonds or in new businesses that generate profit and positive impacts on the ocean, as many youth lead innovative organizations are doing now. But how to start all that? I thought, what if we translate the traditional ocean literacy definition into how does the ocean impact your business, and how does your business impact the ocean? Yes, we can address different ocean literacy projects to industries that belong to that marine or ocean economy, or to the blue or sustainable blue economy. This specific group that uses the ocean as a resource for its business. They need to be aware of all their impacts on the ocean and their responsibilities towards it. But now I wanted to invite you to think out of the box, or out of that blue box that the ocean is. Okay, the blues make us think of the ocean, especially because here now in this context. But couldn't we say that all economies are blue, since all of them directly or indirectly are connected to the ocean? For example, when they need to transport their products worldwide through marine shipping, or because they need to use the water in the manufacturing process of their goods. And where does that water come from? And where does that water goes after being used? And in which conditions? Don't you think we must engage the water and sanitation sector in this discussion? I'm so happy that the source to sea approach will be addressed at the next UN Water Conference, and that in the last UN Ocean Conference, there was a high-level panel on bridging SDG 6 and SDG 14. We can no longer close our eyes to the interconnection of all natural aquatic ecosystems and between them and the artificial aquatic systems of domesticated waters. What about the textile and the fashion industries that pollute the waters with their synthetic fibers and with chemical dyers used to color the fabrics? What about the consequences of fertilizers and pesticides used in agriculture that cause ocean eutrophication? What about the chemicals present in all the hygiene products and medicines we use that will run down the drains of sinks, toilets, and showers after consumed? With all these chemicals be filtered by the sanitation sector before going back to the ocean? The source to sea approach sheds light on all that. Do you think that just the blue economy must become ocean literate? I think we should start bluing all economic sectors in order to ocean literate them all. That's why the Ocean Literacy with All program, we are now developing different projects addressed to the private sector. We will start now a scientific research in partnership with an Australian organization called Blue Praxis to better understand what to deliver through webinars, workshops, and structured trainings in order to blue all economic sectors. And as the UN states, no one must be left behind. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've just added to our challenge. It's not just our traditional blue industries that we need to be thinking about when we're thinking about a blue economy and ocean literacy. We need to be thinking about our hospitals, our retail, our infrastructure. Excellent. Oh.
She also added a new verb to the English language, to ocean literate.
Yeah. I like it. I like it. And we should do that. It's excellent. Thank you so much to our fantastic panel of speakers. There have been some really fantastic themes that have come out. Oh, excellent. An extra round of applause. Many of which resonate with some of the themes that we've been hearing across the last few days around connectivity, not just between connection between people and our ocean and water spaces, but the connectivity across our entire environmental systems, and that we need to be thinking about all of those things when we are thinking about ocean literacy and also blue economy. I'd really love to open the floor up to any questions that anybody might have, to our friends online as well, if any have come through. Nothing yet. Would anybody like to ask a question? Oh, excellent. Thanks.
I want to thank all of our speakers, and I deeply appreciate the core theme of how this is such a holistic issue that we need to approach in a systems approach, one that requires complexity and nuance. And I'm curious from all panelists from the work, what.
Oh, better now? Okay. How can we ensure that we're communicating the effective level of nuance and complexity so that we are, let's say, healing the dissociation that most producers and consumers have with the complexity of the system that they're existing in? Because most people, at least in the Western and developed world, just go to the grocery store and they pick up that food off the shelf, or they're going to the store and they're picking up whatever that object is, and they don't necessarily know everything that it's gone through to get there, or the entire supply chain that may have created the additional impacts that you've referred to. How can we communicate that better to make it more immediate and more tangible for our consumers to hold our producers accountable?
Well, that's a big question. Oh, there we go. Right.
Rather than pontificating, I'll just use a specific example. I mean, you know, one of the you asked specifically about consumers and the connection to you know, through markets to places and ocean spaces and all the rest of it. I think you know, whether or not it's completely scalable is a challenge we have to struggle with. But I think the community supported fisheries model is a really nice model to consider how that might be scaled up more broadly. So, you know, if you go to Skipper Autos here in Vancouver, and if you're just visiting, you know, I encourage you to take a walk down to the dock near Granville Island. There is a boat where you can buy local fish from Skipper Autos. They source all of their fish from fishers on the coast, and they are scaling up their initiative through the purchase and construction of a processing facility in Steveston, so that they can get more fishers products to market. Now, when you buy a fish or a product from Skipper Autos, you see a picture of the individual or the family that is responsible for producing that fish. If I go to supermarkets here in Vancouver, I can see ocean-wise stickers, and ocean-wise stickers give me one mark of credibility and connection to the ocean. That mark of credibility is more on the sustainability side, and you know, there's other schemes similar to that. But Skipper Autos gives you a different connection to the ocean. It's the connection to the people of the ocean and to the place where that fish comes from. So I would like to see a marrying of those two sorts of ways of thinking about fish within the marketplace. You know, if I was to go up one level, you know, there's a lot of work around from MSC on the environmental side. Their social certification process is expanding, if you will. It's still rather weak in comparison to, say, on the social side, the fair trade movement, which you know, thinks about the social implications of stuff. So can we think at much larger scales about environmental and social sustainability in connection to ocean-based industries? That's a fantastic question and challenge that I think Ronnie's going to solve, and that we're going to be able to cite her in the future. So
I am not gonna take that bait. But I will follow up with another example that I found pretty powerful, and I'm probably not going to give any sort of answer to this, but just another thing to chew on. I learned this example from the Outlaw Ocean podcast. I'm going to really plug it right now. It's an excellent podcast. And the example is that you can go into a supermarket and you can buy a can of unmarked tuna, and that's about $1.50. And on that can, it'll say, this fish was caught, packaged, and shipped from the Indian Ocean 10 days ago. 10 days ago, and it only cost me $1.50. If you do that math, you realize that the only way that you can pay that price is if the people who are taking the fish out of the sea are enslaved. And sea slavery is an incredibly big problem on the high seas. And it's just another thing that we would have to come to terms with as the consumer, as well as like, well, we would have to start being okay with seeing a can of tuna go up, like, forbid $3 for the fact that we're going to start paying people to do it and do it equitably. So that's just another way we're going to have to start viewing it.
I think I will just answer in another way, thinking of how we that are engaged in the ocean literacy community are talking about all that. The challenge we have, like trying to ocean literate everyone, to take it outside the educational sector. In one side, placing ocean literacy inside policies so that it can enter curriculums, continue educating children, but even bringing all these discussions, not educating, but bringing the discussions in all the other sectors of society, but without the idea of colonizing them and telling them what to do, but trying even to listen to them and trying to as we say, inside the Ocean Decade, trying to inspire and engage. So that's why ocean literacy is also using other vehicles to touch people. And you're talking about relation, not only influence, because when you're talking about relation, it's something that affects you, that has to do with your stories, with your memories. So it's a way we are trying to do, like to arrive everywhere and try to do the change, to promote behavior change. That's what we try to do, like you say here in English, to walk the talk. I love that expression. So it's like, let's try to be together. And that's what the UN Ocean Decade is trying to do now with such a big movement. I have never seen another decade from the UN with such power, like trying to bring all sectors together, promoting so many things. So it's like what each one of us can do.
Sola, would you like to add anything?
Yes, if you can still hear me. Yeah.
We can, yep.
Thank you. My contribution to the discussion will follow this line. I think the most important thing for us is that sometimes it is not what you see on the shelf that actually the sum total of the entire thing. Sometimes we just heard about using people like a slave on the boat to get the fish. But for us, we're interested in creating some kind of level playing ground, because when some of these big boats come to places like Africa to fish, you see a different kind of fishing gear to get some of those fish. But you can't dictate how these fish are caught when you get to the shelf. And some of these so-called fair trade narrative and trade certification do not actually, in real sense, tell the story of how some of these things, some of these fish are caught in the real sense. So for me, I think it could go back to government creating some level playing ground, but within the internal water and external water, to ensure that fish business is done decently. At the same time, you don't negatively impact on one fishery, and then keep the other one clean, because as a consumer, when you get to the shelf, to a large extent, you can't get the entire story of what actually happened before that fish get to the shelf. So the best way to go is to have every single stakeholder who need to make contribution, to make that contribution adequately, so that we have a healthy ocean. And those of us who are consuming fish, by the time you hear the story about the fish you are consuming, you won't need to run to the toilet.
Thank you. I'm just going to give one really quick example of a non-marine industry that I'm aware of an example happening in the UK, where a intensive care clinician has set up a company called Ocean Care, because he realized I think it may have been early on in COVID, and he realized how much plastic waste his industry was using, the drugs, the everything was being put down through their whole system. And so he is actively working within the NHS system in the UK to encourage the hospitals, the doctors, the medical teams to think differently about how they're using materials. So it's a non-blue, thinking outside the blue, but his company his initiative is definitely with an ocean literacy and ocean remit. And I think that's something that you were saying, Patricia, was like, we need to be thinking, if we want to really infect the change that's needed, we need to think outside our usual suspects a little bit as well. So I just thought I'd give that non-blue example. Anybody else have any further questions? We've got one online. Yeah, you come to the front, or roaming mic. There you go. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gala. So I've got one quick comment, but before that I wanted to ask, and my actual question. So the comment was, in my experience, I don't know how it is in the BC, but working in the UK, there's a huge issue of people thinking local equals sustainable. So I'm just thinking that's a whole nother discussion. So maybe I'll stop there. Yeah. And my question is, So I'm a marine biologist, I'm ocean literate, and I can bring down to details why you would invest in this in terms of what the ocean does for us. But should we maybe have a program of some sort to, I don't know, business literate, the ocean literate people, the lingo of just that we need, because this is what I feel like I lack when I'm talking to businesses. I can definitely see that they are interested, but I can't really translate it down to, if you invest this, the percentages, and I can talk about fish, but, and oxygen production and all. So I'm just wondering, is that maybe, but in addition to speaking directly to business and trying to push ocean literacy, could you help us?
That's a great suggestion. Absolutely.
That's exactly on what we have been working on. When I said translating, like, how does the ocean influence your business? And for example, when we'll develop this survey and the trainings for the private sector, we'll not do the same, we'll not like try to give them the same information we are given in educational context, because otherwise they wouldn't stand it. We have to talk about targets, we have to talk about investments, we have to talk about performance, we have to tell them the opportunities they have to invest in new technologies that with which they can have profit, and they can not work for a sustainable ocean in a naive way, but they can see that they have to answer for some targets, even to have investment and to keep their business going on. So that's why I was saying, we have to work with another language, another mindset. We cannot, for example, even sometimes use the expression ocean literacy, because it would seem, how can I want to ocean literate you, So it's we have to talk their language. So we have to understand a little bit more maybe about finance, about how they work, what is a benefit, what is an opportunity, what can impact their business that they will lose money. Because in the end, for example, I want that the ocean is healthy, is beautiful. That's my life. So to arrive there, I can find the right tools and the right language. So we have to be empathetic with their culture, and we have to see how to communicate, how to dialogue, instead of just pointing the fingers. Because if we just point the fingers, we'll not solve the question.
Yeah.
Those are great points. I agree wholeheartedly. And I'm also of the belief that I think that there should be clear inclusion criteria of who gets to, label themselves as being a part of the blue economy for industry. And even if you look at the example of Canada right now, like our blue economy strategy, we're already securing private investment, putting aside government funds. Like there's all this attention and money starting to be put in this direction. And how do we make sure the right people are receiving that and it's not going to a company that's just being blue washed? So I think there should be some sort of benchmark to achieve. There should be targets and frameworks that need to be meaningfully checked off before you can access any of those resources. And hopefully by having that clear inclusion criteria, and I don't call it exclusion criteria, because I do believe that there should be room for companies to grow into it. By having that, I'm hoping that companies will see, oh, they're going to be left out. They're not going to be successful and have access to all of these other wonderful things if they don't step up.
Yes, if I can, respond directly to the question. I think Nathan and Emma, from my understanding, they have spent much of their time, as a social scientist dealing with this problem. But the gap we currently have is that, physical oceanographer, marine biologists, they still lack the appropriate language to actually communicate effectively with the industry. It was the same thing that we've also faced in the communities. Some of the people in the community, they always tell you, oh, there is nothing new you want to tell us. We have all the answer, we have we know all the criteria. There is nothing new you're going to say, but by the time we change our mode of communication, instead of dictating to them what we think is the right thing, we could create the platform for discussion. We allow them to express their mind. We find a way of, doing storytelling. We begin to get them to listen to us. So I think marine soil science, needs to come up with this kind of, communication strategy to get natural scientists, those who are in, physical oceanographer, marine biologists, to learn basic skills that they can get used to when they, get in contact with businesses, with industries, so that they communicate the exact message. And then another thing we need to actually do is that sometimes communication does not always mean you speak. It also means you listen. So sometimes those of us who are knowledgeable, we always believe, look, it is my duty to impart. No, it's also your duty to listen. Allow people to say what exactly it is they have to say. Then you can always find an entry point to chip in your right message. But I think the Marine Soil Science Network need to come up with this kind of guidelines, with some strategies, some short courses that can make people in the other side of the fence to learn exactly the basic way of communicating the right message, particularly to those in the industry. They don't have time to listen too much. You can't take much of their time. So what is central to them is, how much am I going to get from this new thing you're telling me? So keep your message short, make it straight. At the same time, allow them to actually express themselves and don't give too much of information, and then you will get their attention.
Thank you, Sola. Thank you very much. Any of the panel want to come back on that? No? Any final questions from anybody? Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, thank you, panel. As a marine biologist, as well as an entrepreneur, I'm in both of the space doing ocean literacy research, as well as training myself on that business skills to educate and to educate myself to bring about like being a part of the blue economy. So my question to you is actually, what about the shareholders that is also part of the industry? A lot of them, they invest in a company thinking that there's a return on investment in terms of a dollar value. So how do we communicate this impact of marine life to them when our economy is so structured into looking at money, how much money we can get?
Thanks, Lisa. That was another big question. I'm glad I don't have to answer these questions. Who would like to take that first? How do we communicate within a system that is so money focused?
Maybe I'll repeat some things, but we were talking about inclusion, diversity, equity. And normally we just think about gender, social background, but diversity inclusion can be also create spaces for a dialogue between a marine biologist and a businessman, So that's why empathy is very important. And our cultural and social backgrounds are very important. For example, if you think, why does this company act this way? Wants to earn money without considering the environment. Maybe they come from another generation. Maybe they didn't learn. I don't know. But how to try to establish a dialogue to arrive at the same focus? What do you both want? Maybe it's money, maybe it's a healthy ocean, but maybe both things, they can come together, as I was saying before. And I think that nowadays, for example, for those who work with natural sciences, for example, it could be great to start reading about which are the targets of the SDGs, which are the indicators used in sustainability reports, which are the indicators of ESG reports that now is the big fashion. But it's a good moment because before it was easier to do greenwashing. Now, with these ESG reports, you have to show the materiality. You have to prove that what you're saying, you're really doing. So maybe it's time for scientists start to learn these other languages in order to know how to communicate and to engage together in the same cause, that is profit, opportunities, but also a sustainable and healthy ocean that we know that without that, business cannot go on. So, in the end, we want the same thing.
So I don't work in investment, and I'm not sure that I can answer the question of getting all the way out to stakeholders. But I do know that there's a system of there's a lot of different systems globally for guiding corporate actors as well as the investors towards more sustainable and equitable practices. And within the ocean space in particular, I'd point towards the UN Global Compact, which is a voluntary measure, as many of them are, that corporations can sign on to. And more recently, the UN Global Compact has put out the Sustainable Ocean Principles. Those principles do marry both sustainability principles alongside human rights principles. So the two pieces do come together nicely within that context. And in addition, the United Nations Development Program alongside WWF and a number of other organizations have produced the Sustainable Ocean Investment Principles. I'm not getting the name quite accurate, but there's another document. The Sustainable Finance Principles, which is oriented not so much to the corporations or the corporate actors, but towards, in particular, the financial sector. So those are two particular tools that are used out there. The extent, and again, these are all voluntary at this point, and the extent to which whether an organization or a company has signed on to those documents or principles is then able to be communicated outwards to investment bankers or other financial institutions. I think that's probably a future step that needs to be taken, so that it's not just a voluntary sign-on, but that is also a way of communicating that more broadly, so people can make informed choices, whether that be the financial institutions themselves or broader stakeholders. Like, could I go to my investor and say, hey, I would like to purchase a portfolio of ocean-based companies that is signed on to these principles and is actually practicing them. I don't know whether that's in the future, but maybe that's a possibility.
I just wanted to echo what Patricia said, and I think there's something to be said about using the same metrics that they do, a bit of like a Trojan horse approach, really. And one of those metrics that I think could be on both sides is the training and retaining of highly qualified personnel. Like, that is something that investors look for. And having those personnel who are familiar with the blue economy and who understand the different the different aspects of it is really going to be key. And thankfully, like, companies don't have to do them themselves. Like, there are excellent programs, especially in Canada. The Blue Futures Pathways program is one of those. They train and match highly qualified personnel with companies that want to be in the blue economy.
Thanks, Ronnie. Shola, you got anything to add?
Very briefly, I wish we have that kind of training program here, not only in Nigeria, but across the southeast of Atlantic, but currently there is nothing like that. In my understanding, I think we actually need to understand the so-called these stakeholders. So for me, as an NGO person, if I need to actually address people who are sea blind, in the way they think and they don't care, but at the same time, their 100% economy depends on that ocean. So what I basically do is to actually do some fact finding about these people to know, that help me to know how to engage them. So I engage you based on what you like and what you want to hear. I give you first and foremost the kind of information you have, you need, so that I can now use that to shape the discussion and then point your attention to what exactly what you need to hear in terms of getting the record straight. So if we really want to engage these people, apart from all the information available, it's always very good for ourselves also to understand the kind of people we're dealing with, their psychology and their mindset. So that helps us to be able to know how to shape our discussion. Hopefully, how to convince them to actually come on board and do things right. So that is exactly what I can say at this moment. Like Nathan said, I'm also not into business, but we get this kind of people to listen by giving them what they want to hear, creating the platform, and then we take the communication further to get to where we want them to be. Thank you.
Thank you. So has brought us to the end of our session. There's been an absolutely fantastic discussion where we've explored some really different aspects of what the blue economy might mean, challenged it around ensure we think about equity when we're talking about a sustainable blue economy, challenging us to look beyond the products that we see in the industries that we might naturally expect to be considered within that discussion and across the whole supply and value chain. We're seeing common themes around representation, opportunities, communication, listening. That's come up multiple times in the conversations that we had. And I think one of the really interesting things that's come up is the fact that there are multiple paths to our end goal, and that actually if sustainable economy or if new industry or if growth or profit is what an industry is working towards, we can still use that as a way to bring in ocean literacy and work towards a sustainable ocean. And I think that's a really important message to come out of how these two agendas align. So I'd like to ask you to thank our fantastic panelists again, thank our attendees online. And thank you all so much for being here this afternoon. We have our final Ocean Literacy Dialogue session starting in about 25 minutes. So hopefully we will see some of you there.